I modded Terraria so that the entire world would be corrupted. I went in and changed each and every single block in the game to their corrupted counterpart and filled places that can't be corrupted, like hell, with tons of ebonstone. Today, I'm gonna see if it's actually possible to beat the game this way, but it's gonna be really hard. I spawned into my expert mode medium world, and wow, this place is looking real dark. I tried cutting down some trees for a better weapon and armor, but almost instantly I am swarmed by several Eater of Souls coming in from all directions. And funnily enough, you know, the copper pickaxe is not the best tool for hoarding them all off. So I die. A lot. I quickly realized there was no way I can even take out a single Eater right now, so I dig a little tunnel underground where I'm finally safe from the masses of enemies. Through a combination of crude jumping and axing, I finally am able to get enough wood for some armor and get a new sword, which, you know, luckily are a little bit higher quality than normal wood stuff since, you know, it's ebon wood, so we got that going for us. I go to make a bow as a ranged weapon would be really nice for keeping all these enemies at bay, but then I realized something. There is no stone in this entire world for me to craft arrows with. Similarly, without stone, I'm going to be completely unable to craft a furnace, so ore is pretty much completely useless to us too. This is gonna make gearing up really difficult. And even with my new armor and sword, I still die to the corruption enemies very easily. So with nowhere to go, I do what all good Terraria players do. I start digging down. I dig downwards with the hopes of finding a cave, but with no torch, I'm forced to dig around in the dark. After a couple minutes of digging, I noticed I stopped moving, but I can still hear my character mining. It's then I realized that I must have hit ebonstone and I won't be able to dig any further down here. I decided to start building a tunnel to the side with hopes of finding, I don't know, anything. Literally anything. Inside my tunnel, luckily, I'm safe from any and all Eater of Souls. However, I am in the perfect position to be primed by a giant devourer. These things are menaces. They do so much damage, go through walls, and there's no way to outrun them. If one of these stupid worms spawns in, I just take my hands off the keyboard and watch myself go over to the other side because there is no way to kill them. Eventually it turns nighttime, which is real bad because I have no torches. And since everything is corrupted, no slime spawn in, so I have no gel to craft any. So I just get to sit here, digging through the dirt in the dark. Oh. Fun. After a very long time of digging and several deaths along the way, I finally approach a cave. But you know, I can't see anything inside this cave, so I just sort of go in there and randomly start swinging my pickaxe around. Which, you know, isn't the best method, but we don't really have any other option at this point. I'm eventually able to find and break a pot that gives me some corrupt torches. Finally, I'm no longer just a chicken with my head cut off, sputtering around in the dark. I try going deeper down into the tunnel, but pretty early on, it gets to the point where the bottom is completely ebonstone, which I'm still unable to break through. After a return home, I tried tunneling in the opposite direction, and after dying several more times to these stupid freaking worms, I'm finally able to find another dead end. So after I've tried going down, left, and right, I figure my only option is really to try going up, which I really don't know why I didn't think of sooner. By using some rope that I found, I'm able to go up high enough that the area I'm in is no longer considered corruption. I can start building a small base with some NPC houses. For some reason, I was thinking since this world was corrupt, I wouldn't ever be able to build houses, but having NPCs is going to make this a lot easier. I start building a slime bridge to the right, which finally gives me enough non-corrupted area for slimes to start spawning in. And now I can have a consistent source of gel and stop relying on pots for torches. After a good long while of grinding out some skybridge slimes, I finally have enough money for the merchant to move in, which gives me access to arrows. Having a bow and arrow for this is going to help significantly with my current Eater of Souls problems. I continue building my skybridge because, you know, well, what else am I gonna really do? And I happen to get an insanely rare and lucky spawn, a slime with a bomb in it. This lets the demolitionist move in as well, which will allow me to get rid of some of the pesky ebonstone that stands in my way. While not the most efficient or cheap method for digging down, it gives me a nice way of clearing blockades in emergency situations. As I continue building my skybridge, I'm eventually able to make my way all the way over to the Snow Biome. This is actually hugely important for me, as the Snow Biome is one of the few ways that I'm able to traverse down into caves. You see, in snow biomes, there is no stone, and thusly no ebonstone in this case. The Snow Biome is instead filled with snow and ice, which are now purple ice blocks, both of which can easily be cleared with my regular old copper pickaxe. Now, it's still very dangerous down there as both ice and corrupt enemies can spawn, but hey, at least I'm able to make some progress. This lets me get some much needed weapons like this sick ice sword and boomerang, some accessory upgrades like flurry boots, and some heart crystals to finally give me some real health. Down in one of the ice chests, I was able to secure myself a gravitation potion, which allows me to grab some sweet Sky Island loot, though unfortunately my trips are cut short by the corruption spawns in combination with some harpies. Though I did manage to secure some balloons and a Star Fury. With this, I'm finally able to cut down Eater of Souls in 2 or 3 hits, which makes them significantly less scary. Finally, I can hold my own against the corruption enemies, though the lack of furnace still prevents me from creating any armor, so it still means they can slice through me in just a couple hits. While I can't forge any ore into bars, I was able to pick up enough gold bars from chests to be able to craft a gold pickaxe. This will be a huge help underground, as the copper pickaxe in combination with my lack of armor was truly just cranking that death counter up. In one of my various journeys, I managed to kill an Eater of Souls, and he drops the Shadow Scale Mail. Now, this is a 1 in 525 chance to drop from Eater of Souls, so even though it's super rare, I was bound to get one of these pieces eventually with the amount of corruption enemies I've had to kill. After returning to the caves for a little more grinding, I finally got enough materials to summon the Eye of Cthulhu, my first boss. And after building this extremely crude arena, I'm finally able to take him on. Through my sky bridge, I was able to secure a ton of stars, which allowed me to craft lots of Jester arrows, which had me easily chunk through the first stage of the Eye of Cthulhu. Though clearly I did not come super prepared, as I have to craft more Jester arrows in the middle of my battle. That's my bad. But with no health potions used, I'm able to get the eye down to its second phase. With the Hermes boots picked up, and the fact that I have a huge surface to run across in my sky bridge makes this phase easily beam as well. Despite having a relatively easy time with the rest of this fight, I have a near-death encounter at the end and hang out with just a couple of HP while I was potion sick. The lack of armor is really starting to get to me now. This clutch defeats the eye and wins me the fight. Now I have access to Demonite ore, though without a furnace, this really isn't very useful to me. Though the Shield of Cthulhu will be greatly appreciated in the coming fights. With the Eye of Cthulhu dead, I decide to start working towards my next goal, the Eater of Worlds. Because of the insane amount of corruption enemies I've had to kill, I've got more than enough materials to summon him. So I decided to find the real corruption biome and craft the worm food there, which should be no problem in this sea of Ebonstone, right? Before heading out, my Dryad moves in, which is actually the single most important NPC in the game for me. You want to know why? This stuff. You probably forgot about this stuff, but it's called Purification Powder. You can buy it from the Dryad and it will spread a small puff that can purify any block. Well, normally this stuff is pretty useless, as the small area that it uncorrupts quickly becomes corrupt again in just a couple days, and it's far less effective than the Contaminator. For us, Purification Powder is absolutely vital. Using it, we can go down the surface and purify a couple blocks of Ebonstone and finally get ourselves some actual stone. With this stone in hand, I'm finally able to craft a furnace, which will allow me to craft all this ore I've been hanging on to into bars. Through this, I'm able to craft myself some new pants and use my Demonite to craft myself a new bow. Though I get the worst modifier on it, so I use the rest of my reserves to craft another one. I decide my next move should probably be picking up some health. So I decide to head into the ice biome to search. Despite my upgrades, this biome is still a nightmare to look through, as the powerful ground enemies of the Snow Biome combined with the flying Eater of Souls of the corruption make traversing through this biome an absolute pain. This results in a ton of death. Though eventually I discover the only other underground biome that I can dig through without a nightmare pickaxe, the glowing mushroom biome. Similar to the ice biome, this biome is made out of incorruptible mud, which protects it from the dark scourge of the corruption. This biome helps out a ton in getting valuable life crystals that I need before my fight. I aimlessly walk around the ice biome for another hour or so with not a single life crystal in sight, so I decide to head to the jungle. Or should I say what used to be the jungle, because now it's more of a purple place. I try to think of this one on the fly, guys. I didn't have a joke written. It just says in the script, think of joke, and I didn't replace it. So I'm sorry. Even though the jungle is completely corrupt now, similarly to the glowing mushroom biome, the jungle doesn't really have much stone in it, instead using the same mud base. So it's still possible to traverse through without having to really dig through Ebonstone. My journey through the jungle gets me a ton of new heart crystals and also some great new accessories. So after just a bit of wandering around, I've upped myself to 400 health. I return home and the goblins have invaded my dear sky bridge in my absence, though they are no match for just a couple of Jester's arrows. After that, I'm finally able to make my way over to the real corruption where I craft the worm food. Thankfully, since my home is also in the corruption, I'm able to take him on there while I'll have easy access to my nurse. I built a small arena around my home, which really is just one small bridge of platforms, and summon in the Eater of Worlds. Immediately going into this fight, I'm getting my butt handed to me. Admittedly, I've never fought the Eater of Worlds in the wide open. I usually just crack open some shadow orbs, grab a vile thorn, and just sort of call it a day. I was definitely not used to the amount of spit that was constantly chucking off of his body. With only a third of the boss's health down, I sprint up my rope to have the nurse fix my boo-boos. But by the time I get back down, the worm is gone. Heartbroken, I decide to summon him in again, and now that I know that I can't flee up to the nurse, this fight goes a lot differently. This time I die. This brings me the realization that, yeah, maybe this little 2-foot platform that I had crafted wasn't long enough, and maybe I should try and make something just a little bit longer. After gathering some more platforms, which mind you takes forever as I'm constantly having to ward off these corruption enemies, I make the bridge a lot longer and summon in the Eater of Worlds one final time. But with this new mobility, I'm easily able to take the worm down. Only took 3 attempts on an expert world, no big deal. I craft myself some full shadow armor and finally get myself the forbidden nightmare pickaxe. Now that I have this, I'll easily be able to slice through the ebonstone that had previously been impeding our progress. Getting the pickaxe is a huge step to trivializing the corruption of this world. My next goal is to kill Skeletron, so I start heading to the right of my spawn. I head over to the dungeon and build a proper arena and challenge Skeletron, though in my first attempt, corruption enemies spawn everywhere and I'm swiftly killed. Man, I'm just not good at this game. I come back and bomb the areas around the dungeon and build a giant wall around my arena to keep the enemies out. And I die again. So I further expand the platforms of this arena to give myself even more mobility. And I die again. It's at this point that I decided to do the rest of this run off stream, as I thought it would be much easier since doing this run involves a lot of grinding and I was having a hard time finding ways to stay entertaining on my 4th attempt at this stupid skull boss. During my next session, I decided to find the Goblin Tinkerer, as I realized the big reason I was dying was my lack of mobility. I purchased some rocket boots from him and craft together a lot of my remaining accessories. With these new upgrades, I decided that now I should finally be able to take on that stupid skull. And this time the fight is a lot easier. My increased survivability was 100% due to my new sleek rocket boots. Besides that, the fight was pretty uneventful, though a star did come down from the heavens and destroy Skeletron's arm, which that was pretty cool to watch. I defeat him and take a nice sit on my new Chippy's couch. I head inside the dungeon, but I'm not really looking to stick around for long. The only drop I really need is the Cobalt Shield, which just so happens to be the first chest I checked. With that out of the way, the only thing really left for me to do is to head down to hell. Building an elevator is usually one of my least favorite parts of a Terraria playthrough on account of it being so boring and tedious, but the whole world being corrupted makes this 10 times worse. Digging through ebonstone takes like 3 times as long as digging through traditional stone. This is so fun. I'm having so much fun. This is awesome. Luckily, I found a couple of mining potions throughout my playthrough, and in combination with the well-fed buff, this speeds this up by a lot, though it still takes way too long. Also, after I got around halfway down to hell, I realized earlier in this playthrough I had already started a elevator, and now I've built a nearly identical shaft directly next to this one. Oopsie. After what feels like hours, I finally make my way all the way down to hell, and this place looks, oh no. So yeah, even though Ash is technically an incorruptible block, I had the mod change hell to be filled with ebonstone instead. Otherwise it would have just been like normal hell. Now it's spooky hell. And this only makes hell that much worse. After digging through hell for a long time, I finally get enough hellstone for a full set of hellstone armor, an imp staff, a new bow, and a shiny new molten pickaxe. After that, I go through hell as usual, picking up some jobs from shadow chest, and I get a banner for killing my 700th Eater of Souls. I continue progressing until I reach the edge of my world and start building out my hell bridge to prep for the fight against the wall of flesh. I start building it out of the block that I had by far the most of, purple ice blocks, after all those trips to the snow biomes, but I kind of forgot that if you don't have frostbark boots that you kind of slide on this. But that won't be a problem, right? Though it does make placing down these blocks much easier. After expanding my hell bridge to around halfway around my world, I decide to start prepping for my fight with the wall. My first instinct is bee nades, so I go to kill the queen bee. But after killing her one time, I realize I can't get additional beeminations because I can't farm stingers because the jungle is completely corrupt. So that plan is out the window. So I decide to use the Phoenix Blaster as my primary weapon for this fight, which means I'll have to go grab a handgun from the dungeon. 14 Aquaceptors hours later, I'm finally able to grab a handgun from the dungeon. I go home and craft my Phoenix Blaster, as well as have the Goblin Tinkerer reforge all of my accessories for defense. After that, I grab some potions and head back down to hell to start my final challenge before hard mode. I sit at the edge of my hell bridge and kill my 900th Eater of Soul. And with that banner in my hand, I finally start the horrifying Wall of Flesh. And I wish I could say he was harder. I mean, meteor bullets kind of trivialized this entire boss fight. Plus, I was super over-prepared after all of my embarrassing losses at Skeletron. So, with just a little pew 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 pew, I had done it. The first half of Terraria in an entirely corrupted world completed. And with the wall down, I can already tell that hard mode is going to be even more insane. Thanks so much for watching my corrupted trip through Terraria. If you're interested in seeing a part 2 where I go through hard mode, let me know. I can only imagine how impossible spawning in Plantaria is going to be. Thanks again, and I'll see you guys next time.